Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Fuchs, and I'm a Senior Specialist in the Community Education Department at MDA. We're thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar on independent living. This learning event is a part of our larger MDA Community Education Program, which focuses on bringing the neuromuscular disease community together around education and resources. Be sure to visit the community education section at mda.org for updates on upcoming events. We are recording today's event and will be posting it to our website for on-demand viewing at a later date. Please know that all phone lines have been muted, but you can still ask questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of each presentation with today's presenters. You can simply feel free to chat in your questions into the chat box, and they will be addressed after the presentation. For nearly 75 years, MDA has led the way in funding research to accelerate the development of new treatments, expanding access to care and clinical trials through the MDA Care Center Network, and advocating for access and inclusion to the neuromuscular disease community. MDA delivers its mission through research, care, advocacy, and engagement. Since its inception, MDA has invested more than $1.1 billion in neuromuscular disease research. MDA funds projects throughout the drug development spectrum, from early discovery through translational stages and infrastructure support for clinical trials. At MDA Care Centers located at over 150 top medical institutions nationwide, people living with neuromuscular disease and their families find more than medical expertise. They experience a community fiercely dedicated to advancing access to care and nurturing hope. MDA's advocacy work focuses on support for accelerated approvals and novel research, access to healthcare, treatments, independent living, newborn screening, accessible air travel, and more. This focus plays a vital role in shaping laws and policies that support the needs of people living with rare neuromuscular diseases. Our community education and recreation programs are designed to connect individuals and families. We are committed to building a nurturing environment where our members can share experiences, triumphs, and challenges. In 2023, we offered over 40 educational programs, over 20 summer camps, and dozens of other community activities, both in person and virtually. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to join the MDA community by registering with us. You'll see a link in the chat, and registering is free. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Shannon Wood and Amber Bosselman. Shannon Wood joined MDA in April as Director of Disability Policy, where she works to ensure that members of the neuromuscular community can learn, work, travel, and socialize without discrimination by advancing policies that maximize our community's access to key programs and services. Prior to joining MDA, Shannon served as Director of Advocacy and Policy at the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, where she advocated on health and disability policy issues impacting people affected by MS. She also brings experience from previous state and federal advocacy roles with the American Psychological Association. Our second speaker today will be Amber Bosselman. Amber is a disability life coach with a strong clinical background in psychology that blends perfectly with her practical and everyday tools to help people with disabilities increase their independence and overcome obstacles. Amber is a business owner and loves to be an example of what is possible. Thank you both for being here today. And now, Shannon, I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Move that box over. And Sarah, can you just confirm that the slides are showing?
Yep, looks good.
All right, perfect. Hi, everyone. As Sarah shared, I'm Shannon Wood. I'm Director of Disability Policy here at MDA. And today I'm going to be covering MDA's advocacy work on independent living issues, as well as providing a high-level overview of your rights under the law. So taking a look at the agenda, today I'm going to cover MDA's advocacy team, sort of what we do in my department. Again, a high-level overview of your rights under existing law. We're going to take a pretty close look at the Fair Housing Act and the Fair Housing Amendments Act. We'll then talk about some different policies that impact independent living issues, and then also how you can get involved, as well as plenty of time for Q&A. All right, so here on the advocacy team, we work to advocate for public policies that will benefit the lives of people living with a neuromuscular disease, enabling them to live more independent lives. And really our objective is to inform lawmakers on how policies impact the neuromuscular community and to amplify voices with lived experience in the process. And we do this through a variety of different tactics, including lobbying and grassroots organizing. But before we dive into public policy, let's talk first about your rights under existing law. First, as everyone on this call knows, people with disabilities, including those living with a neuromuscular disease, face discrimination and exclusion. But federal laws do provide some protection, and these laws are a direct result of people with disabilities organizing for federal legislation, as you see in this photo here of the Capitol crawl that led to the signing of the ADA. I want to call out a few major laws that provide some protections. Of course, first we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination in employment, government, public accommodations, commercial facilities, transportation, and telecommunications. To be protected, one must have a disability or have a relationship to someone with a disability. And disability here is defined by the ADA as a person with a record of physical or mental impairment that substantially limits at least one major life activity or is perceived by others as having such an impairment. We also have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which prohibits discrimination based on disability in federal programs that receive federal money. This is known as Section 504. In federal employment, including federal contractors, and different sections provide unique protections. Now, an important law that we're going to be talking about today is the Fair Housing Amendments Act, which was signed into law by Reagan in 1988. And it amends Title VIII, which is the Fair Housing Act of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in housing. And it extended protections to people with disabilities, which they define in line with Section 504 to include any person with a recorded impairment that substantially limits at least one major life activity like speaking, breathing, walking. And this law applies to all housing, whether private or public. So condos, mobile homes, trailer parks, timeshares, any unit that's designed as a residence. So taking a closer look at the FHAA, this law prohibits many activities that discriminate against people with disabilities in housing sales or housing rentals, and also around housing financing. So taking a look at the list here, some of these activities that are prohibited include the refusal to sell or rent when a bona fide offer has been made based on disability, imposing different terms and conditions, discouraging an individual from living in a community due to their disability, which is known as steering, or advertising as to deny access, misrepresenting the availability of a unit because of the applicant's disability, and blockbusting, or encouraging the sale or rental of a unit by implying that people of a certain race, color, disability are entering the community in large numbers. And the FHAA also expands the traditional list of prohibited activities, which again apply to race, color, religion, sex, to actions directly related to discrimination based on disability. So some examples of these actions include it is illegal for a landlord to refuse to allow a tenant to make modifications at the tenant's expense, which would permit the tenant to fully enjoy the premises, and that applies to both indoor and outdoor premises. The landlord can, where it's reasonable, require the tenant to restore the interior upon move out, but refusing modifications to a lobby, a parking lot, a laundry room is also discriminatory. Asking about disability during the application process is discriminatory unless they're asking that of every applicant. They can ask if you meet certain financial requirements or if you're eligible for housing available only to people with disabilities. And the FHAA requires two types of reasonable accommodations. There's structural modifications and policy changes. So with structural modifications, housing providers must permit reasonable modifications of existing premises if necessary for a person with a disability to use the premises at cost to the resident. The renter has to agree to restore the premises, describe the proposed modification, and assure that the mod is going to be done in a workmanlike manner, meaning you've got all applicable permits that you might need. A landlord cannot increase a security deposit, but if it's necessary to ensure a restoration upon move out, they may require that you pay a reasonable amount of money, which can't exceed the actual cost of the restorations, into an interest-bearing escrow account. And then once moved out and the unit is restored to its original condition, any leftover money in that account goes back to the tenant. Basically, with these rules, FHAA created 3 different types of home mods. You have mods that don't have to be restored. An example would be widening a bathroom door, which wouldn't affect the next tenant's use. You have modifications that need to be restored but don't require an escrow account. An example of this would be removing a base cabinet under the kitchen sink, which the next tenant might want to use as storage. And then you have mods that need to be restored and are pretty expensive and would need that escrow account. So an example would be swapping out a bathtub for a roll-in shower. All right, and now let's move on to policy changes. So FHAA also requires reasonable changes in rules and policies necessary to give people with disabilities equal opportunity to use and enjoy the dwelling. This could include allowing a tenant with a disability to have a service animal, even though the building has no pets, reserving an accessible parking space for a tenant with a mobility impairment, or waiving a rule that allows only tenants to use the laundry facilities to accommodate a caregiver or an aide. Basically, any policy that denies people with disabilities access to a facility or service may violate this law. All right, you may be wondering about new construction. Any newly constructed multifamily dwelling, which is defined as 4 or more units, must provide basic accessibility to people with disabilities if the building was ready for occupancy in 1991 or later. And some design features that you see here apply to all units and buildings with elevators and to ground floor units and multi-level buildings without elevators. Multi-story townhouses have been found to be exempt from these requirements, but the following are FHAA's required accessible design features. At least one building entrance must be on an accessible route. All public and common use areas must be readily accessible. All doors into and within all premises must be wide enough for wheelchairs. All premises must contain an accessible route into and through the dwelling unit. All light switches, outlets, environmental controls must be placed in an accessible location. There must be reinforcements in the bathroom for later installation of grab bars around the toilet, tub, and shower. And then usable kitchens and bathrooms must be provided so that a person who uses a wheelchair can maneuver around it. So what do you do if you believe you've been discriminated against? You need to file a complaint with HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Complaints must be filed within 1 year of the Discriminatory Act, and they can be filed online, over the phone, or by mail. You can also bring an action in federal district court within 2 years. Some states and localities have very similar fair housing laws, and if so, that agency may receive the discrimination complaint instead of HUD. Upon receiving a complaint that's not referred to a state or local agency, HUD has 100 days to determine whether there's reasonable cause, and then within that period, HUD is going to engage in what's called conciliation or voluntary efforts with the parties. If the case is not conciliated and there is reasonable cause, HUD is going to go ahead and issue a formal charge on behalf of the complainant. Once a formal charge has been issued, either party has 20 days to choose to have the case brought in federal district court, where the complainant is represented by the Justice Department. If it's not removed to court, the case proceeds before an administrative law judge or an ALJ, and that ALJ is appointed by HUD within 120 days. The ALJ must decide within 60 days, and that decision is subject to review by HUD and then ultimately the courts. In determining whether to remove a case to federal district court or pursue administrative remedy with HUD, folks should know that the remedies are different depending on which path you choose. Both forms provide for injunctive relief, so basically ordering the housing provider to allow for modifications and or changes to rules or policies, and actual damages, so out-of-pocket expenses, attorney fees, emotional emotional distress. And the difference here is really the monetary award. The court can award punitive damages, where an ALJ can only award civil penalties, which are paid to the government. So here are some frequently asked questions that I see around this law. The first being, can a landlord ask specific questions about my disability? No. However, a landlord of subsidized housing can ask questions about your disability only if that information is used to determine whether you're eligible for housing designated specifically for people with disabilities, or if you're eligible for a federal preference because of your disability. Another question, and I think this is one that we got before the webinar, is I recently obtained a service dog, and I've lived for years in a building that has a no pet policy. Can they prevent me from having my service dog? No, your landlord must allow you to have a service dog. And what about, I believe I've been discriminated against by a public housing project. Should I file a complaint under the FHA or Section 504? Because as I shared earlier, Section 504 applies to any program that's receiving federal assistance, which includes public housing. Because public housing projects receive that federal money, you can file a complaint under either or both. The key here is that under the FHA, you can seek monetary relief and force the landlord to allow modifications at your expense. Under Section 504, the landlord could be required to pay. All right, so now that we've covered rights, I want to talk a little bit about MDA's advocacy efforts related to independent living. There are so many different components to living independently, and we definitely work on a variety of different policies here at MDA. Note that this is not an exhaustive list of everything we work on in advocacy related to independent living, but it should give you an idea of the different types of policies that we work on. So first up with housing, we support legislation to increase investment in the low-income housing tax credit program and ensure that developers of housing are building more accessible units, right? We know that the stock of accessible housing is incredibly low, incredibly hard to get into. And this bill really allows for creating more units that are accessible, especially where in communities where people can walk or move around easily in wheelchairs. So this bill increases funding for the program to increase the number of accessible homes, while also requiring that the states administering the program have to construct at least 20% of their units as accessible. Moving on to disability benefits, this covers a whole bunch of different policy issues. We support legislative proposals to modernize disability benefits and really bring them into the 21st century. This includes raising asset limits for SSI beneficiaries and eliminating the marriage penalty. One bill that would do just that is the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act, which is a bill that we highlighted just last month at our 2024 Hill Day, which this is a picture from our Hill Day last month. Also under disability benefits or related to disability benefits are ABLE accounts. We know that housing expenses are considered a qualified disability expense from an ABLE account, like mortgage payments, rent, utilities, and MDA advocates for legislation to build awareness of ABLE accounts to help people with disabilities meet their basic housing needs. There are several bills in Congress related to ABLE accounts, including a bill that would provide $50 million to states to increase ABLE awareness. The next bucket is another big bucket, home and community-based services legislation. We are doing a ton of work around strengthening access to home and community-based services. There's multiple bills on this front. You have the HCBS Relief Act, which is would provide a 10-point increase in FMAP or federal matching funds to states for Medicaid to enhance home and community-based services. And the funds can be used for a variety of different HBCS issues, including eligibility, direct care worker pay, paid family and sick leave, transportation expenses. We also have the Better Care, Better Jobs Act, which has that enhanced FMAP or federal matching funds, workforce incentives, maintenance of effort for eligibility, and also money follows the person permanency. We also have the HBCS Access Act, which is Senator Casey's moonshot bill, and this combines the funding and the training aspects of the Better Care, Better Jobs Act and the funding mechanisms to more holistically support home and community-based services. And then with education and employment, last we just support a ton of different policies related to strengthening access to education and employment for people with disabilities, including full funding of IDEA, the Disability Employment Incentive Act, and the RISE Act, which would require schools to adopt transparent policies regarding disability services, clarifies that past IEP and 504 plans are sufficient to establish disability in college, and also authorizes $10 million for the center charged with supporting disability training for faculty, in addition to providing support for students. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. We work on a ton of different issues, and if you're interested in flagging an issue for us, please feel free to reach out to the MDA's Advocacy Department. All right. So as I was going through those policy issues, you might be thinking, hey, I have a story related to those issues. And if you want to use your story to affect change, please consider joining MDA's Action Network on Voter Voice. Here on the screen, you see what this looks like when you sign up. Basically, you enter your info, including your voting address, and our software, Voter Voice, pre-populates it with your representatives and your senators. We send alerts when lawmakers are considering important bills that are going to have an impact on the neuromuscular disease community. We provide you with all the text on the policy, all the background on the issue, but we also give you an opportunity to customize that message and add your personal story. So you might share what this issue looks like in your hometown, kind of clarifying that you're a constituent and that this is an issue that matters to you. These personal stories go an incredibly long way in demonstrating the impact of bills on folks back home, and can really help move the needle on bills and have progress. And I'll make sure we drop a link to the Action Network later. With that, that's the end of the programming. Sarah, do you want to open it up for questions?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shannon. I will take over sharing here. Oh, guys. I'm not sure why this isn't responding. There we go. All righty. So yes, we do have a couple of questions. Feel free to put your questions into the chat box. But for right now, we will start to address some questions that were asked upon registration. Thank you for addressing some of those in your presentation, Shannon. So the first question is, how do individuals with muscular dystrophy get the funds for rent?
Yeah, this is a great question, and MDA has a ton of different resources in our resource center about applying for different disability benefits, whether it's supplemental security income or Social Security disability insurance. Strongly encourage folks to look at the materials in the resource center about applying for those and receiving those benefits. There are also really key programs at the Department of Housing and Urban Development that may help. There's the Section 811 Supportive Housing for People with Disabilities program. This is the only HUD program dedicated to affordable, accessible housing in the community for non-elderly, very low-income people with significant disabilities. There's also Section 8 Housing Choice Vouchers, which help very low-income families and people with disabilities afford rental housing in the private market. And a third of those vouchers are headed by a non-elderly, meaning under the age of 62, person with a disability. The last one I want to flag here is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the CFPB. They have a great resource on getting help with paying rent and bills. So strongly encourage you to check out their resources online too. And I'll make sure I drop the link in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know you addressed the service animals, so we said that you cannot be discriminated against for service animal. Do you need to disclose that this animal is a service animal?
So under the ADA, there are certain questions that can't be asked of you around your service animal. There are a lot of great resources from HUD actually on guidance around allowing assistance animals and service animals. In 2020, HUD released new guidance following a significant increase in complaints around requests for reasonable accommodations of assistance animals. I can drop a link to the guidance in the chat, but contacting MDA's Resource Center is another great way to get help.
Perfect, thank you. I have a question here about qualifying for SSDI with a neuromuscular disease.
Yeah, qualifying for SSDI can be a pretty tricky process, a very legal heavy process. Anyone seeking it must be considered disabled according to what's called the Blue Book, which is basically SSA's guidebook of all the conditions that it considers potentially disabling. CMT falls under the listing for peripheral neuropathies, and disability is defined not in the way that you and I might expect disability defined. It's really defined as the inability to engage in what's called substantial gainful activity. Basically, do you work enough? Do you make enough? And by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment that's expected to result in death or is expected to last at least 12 months. Lab results, diagnoses can help provide support for that determination, but what they really want to know at SSA is how motor function problems interfere with major daily activities. Again, the application can be daunting, but MDA has a ton of different resources on applying for these benefits and are happy to serve as a resource. We'll be sure to drop that in the chat as well.
Great, thank you. Next question, why can't Medicare recipients get home health care coverage? It says Medicaid can do it, and then this person, says if they want to remain at home, they need this care.
I love this question. Amen. Medicare does have a minimal, very narrow home health benefit, but it's incredibly difficult to get, and there's a ton of implementation issues with it. The current benefit is not holistic, and it's not sufficient to meet the needs of people living with a neuromuscular disease. There does seem to be some political will for changing this. The Harris campaign recently released a proposal for Medicare enrollees with modest incomes to be provided coverage for home health care. Just a realistic note is that the proposal is very expensive. The Brookings Institute, they researched this, and a very conservatively designed program, so one that would cover those unable to perform at least 2 ADLs and would require some enrollee cost sharing, would have a price tag of $40 billion a year. Again, that's according to an estimate from the Brookings Institute. The campaign has said this would be paid for through expanded Medicare drug price negotiations and some international tax reform. Given the high price tag, it's unclear the political feasibility of a proposal like that actually moving on Capitol Hill. But of course, things are changing with an election coming up, so we should have a better idea of what that proposal might look like following the election.
Great, thank you. Now our next questions, I'm going to tie it into something that I saw in the chat as well, is landlords making home repairs. So if the landlord doesn't deem it necessary, what is it that you can do? And then also someone mentioned that their complex was renovated and now they can't access their mailbox, their outgoing mailbox. So anything about those landlord repairs?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this comes up a lot, and this is not the first time I've actually heard of the mailbox issue too. Your rights under the law apply to both indoor and outdoor premises. Without knowing the unique specifics, I would just strongly recommend you to one, reach out to MDA's Resource Center, of course, but also reach out to your local fair housing office or your state fair housing office. Each state also has what's called a P&A, a protection and advocacy system. These are federally mandated agencies providing legal assistance and advocacy services to people with disabilities. A great way to find yours is through the National Disability Rights Network, which sort of serves as a clearinghouse for these P&A systems, but they can really look into the legalities of your case and provide assistance in advocating to your landlord. So strongly recommend those as a resource.
Perfect, thank you. It seems like we have a lot of questions about maybe landlord pushback on that. So if you have a link that maybe people could follow, we can throw that in the chat. And then hopefully people can get started on that process.
Absolutely.
Next question, do employers pay for any personal care hours? If not, how do you pay for personal care after other programs go away once you start working?
Yeah, and we know that personal care attendants are financially out of reach for all too many people. Without knowing the specifics of your situation and what sort of programs might be available in your area, I would strongly recommend reaching out to MDA's Resource Center or your local Center for Independent Living to see what type of assistance is available to you. Some localities provide assistance too, so I think the MDA's Resource Center would be best able to kind of see what's around you and what might be available.
Thank you. We've got a couple more here. How do you get people to hear you out? Trying to explain why I need to live in a particular ADA environment, yet I don't qualify age-wise.
Yeah, of course, I'm a big fan of MD's Resource Center. I think they're best equipped to kind of understand your specific question, and then again, also connect you to those protection and advocacy systems. For example, I'm here in Virginia. The Disability Law Center of Virginia is our system. They regularly provide one-on-one kind of case assistance around this, but there are resources available on MDA's website to help with this. Learning more specifics about your individual situation can allow MDA's Resource Center to help problem solve and find solutions there.
Thank you. Do you know of any programs or benefits that can help pay for assisted living?
Cool. Is a little bit tricky, and not to again punt to MDA's Resource Center, but it really depends on your individual scenario and kind of different aspects of your situation. Would strongly again recommend reaching out to MDA's Resource Center with your specifics, and they can help problem solve there.
Definitely, thanks. So this person stopped work to raise and homeschool her son. She was later diagnosed with FSHD and unable to return to work. She was declined disability income because she had not been working for a number of years. Is there a law that helps people like her obtain disability income?
Yeah. I would strongly recommend reaching out to your protection and advocacy system in your state. They can help you kind of walk through the process for applying for SSDI. It is very common to have applications denied there. Again, there are different ways you can approach that application. You may also qualify under a family member's record of work, so there are some workarounds there. Don't get discouraged. MTA's Resource Center also has some great information, including an access workshop on how to apply for different programs, whether it's Social Security disability insurance or supplemental security income. So there are resources available to help get you through that application process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looks like we might have two more questions and then we'll move on to Amber. Do you know of any resources for home modifications? I know that's one that we get a lot here at MDA.
Yes, there are different, it depends on your individual situation. There are a lot of different state programs available that will provide grant funding or financial assistance to people to help meet those home modifications. Those those grant programs are not created equal. The benefit can be different. The financial assistance amount can be different. Some of them may be disease limited. Your local Center for Independent Living is going to be the best contact in terms of figuring out which assistance is available in your area and where you might be able to find funding help for those modifications.
Yes, good point. I know a lot of resources are state-based or locally based, so it's important to get to know what's available in your area, which the Resource Center can help with. Last one that it looks like we have here is someone asked that we speak a little bit more on ABLE, but nothing specific. So do you have any resources that we could possibly put in the chat to help people explore that topic? I believe also our Access workshop, Access to Financial Independence, does include information on that, which we'll link in the chat.
Yes, I strongly recommend that Access workshop. ABLE accounts are a great opportunity, and like I mentioned in the policy spotlight, there's not a lot of awareness around them. They can help you get around some of the sort of tricky asset limit rules that apply to supplemental security income beneficiaries. Yeah, definitely drop the link to the MDA Resource Center and the Access workshop on those in the chat. That's a great idea.
Perfect. And it looks like Marissa just did that. So that should be, and a resource for ABLE. So those should be in there for you to follow up on. Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for being here and telling us all about everything that you guys do in the advocacy department. We are going to switch gears a little bit from legislation to daily living, where we are going to talk with Amber Bosselman, who is a certified disability life coach. Amber, thank you for being here, and I will turn the time over to you.
Friends, I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I'm really grateful that we've just received so much practical, applicable information on how to live independently. As Sarah mentioned, I'm here to talk about more of the day-to-day life aspect. So why should you care a word about what comes out of my mouth? Let me introduce myself to you first. My name is Amber, and I have been studying mental health and human behavior for over 10 years. It started with a bachelor's degree in psychology. That's where I first developed my love of the human mind and the power that we have in our brain. After a bachelor's degree in psychology, I went on to obtain a certification as a life coach from a top-tier company. And that really took the knowledge that I learned from psychology about the human mind into how can we help everyday people improve their life. I took what I learned from that degree and that life coach certification and began applying it specifically to life with a disability. So I launched my private coaching practice about 4 years ago, and I specialize as a disability life coach. And people ask me all the time, they say, Amber, what is a life coach? It's a term we're not often familiar with. So let me explain that a little bit for you now. As a disability life coach, I help people with disabilities and their loved ones overcome obstacles and increase their independence. That's a very basic introduction for you. Your mind is the most powerful tool that you have. You just weren't taught how to fully use it. And that's where I come in. So, a little bit more about me. I am married to the man of my dreams. This is my husband, Christopher. I think I just heard some ahs coming across the Ethernet. Thanks, friends. We got married a little bit over a year ago, and it truly was one of the happiest days of my life. We now own a home, and I manage a team of caregivers, and I can confidently say that I feel like I live an independent life. Now, there's a lot of helpers that make that possible. I do manage a team of caregivers. I do live with my husband, but all of that creates a feeling of a very independent life. I'm a business owner. I drive independently. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I just want you to know that this is possible. And what I want to share are some tools that are going to help you get there today. Because we all need tools to live independently. MDA has just offered us a lot of tools and resources to help you learn how to navigate things like housing, ADA compliance, finding healthcare professionals, etc., managing the financial burdens, of life with a disability. That is not what I do. I am here to teach you the tools that you need to keep going when things get hard. I'm going to teach you what to do when you get overwhelmed. You were never taught how to manage your mind so that you can overcome any obstacle that comes your way, no matter where you are on this journey to living independently. Now, I also have a special gift for each of you at the end of my 30 minutes, so please stay tuned for that. You're not going to want to miss it. But let's jump into some of these tools. What will you get from me today? I'm going to give you 4 specific tools. And friends, these are all tools that you can start using right now. And I have many tools in my toolbox as a disability life coach. Remember, what I do is I help people overcome obstacles and increase their independence. So just know that the 4 tools that I picked for you today are some of the best, most powerful, life-changing tools that, again, you can do right now. So let's jump in. Tool number 1 is a tool that each of you already have, but I think you have forgotten. Tool number 1 is experience. Your experience. And it's experience born of necessity, right? We can't opt out of life with a disability. I can't decide not to be disabled anymore. But in my 29 years of life so far, I have gained a lot of experience that has laid the foundation for me to overcome the obstacles that I face right now and that are coming in the future. So my life didn't always look like this, friends. Remember I mentioned own a home, running a business, married to the man of my dreams, managing caregivers. It didn't always look like this. I have been working for years to create the independence that I now enjoy. My first taste of independence was college. That's when I first moved away from home. I flew the nest, the safe, cozy nest that my parents had provided, and I went to school. I went to school out of state. I was 9 hours away from home when I went to college. But even flying the nest and going to college, I didn't even do that alone. I was surrounded by loving friends and roommates. I even had a couple siblings who were still at the same university that I could lean on. So that was my chance to practice living on my own. I could learn I can hire caregivers. I can make this work. But I want you to remember that your journey doesn't have to look like everyone else's. I graduated college, as I mentioned, with a degree in psychology, and it took me 7 years to complete a 4-year degree. I took a lighter class load than was typical. I also took 1.5 years off to do a service mission for my church, and those are experiences that I wouldn't trade for anything. So it's okay if your journey doesn't look like everyone else's. It's okay if your journey looks nothing like mine. My goal today is to be an example of what is possible, not to provide some strict path that you have to follow. There are an infinite ways to independent living. I'm here to provide tools to help you get to yours. So I want to share some tools that were important for me along my path to independence. One is adaptive vehicle. I can drive a vehicle independently, and this is tremendously helpful for me to live my independent life. I didn't know if I could drive. I'll be honest. I was a senior in high school, and I said, Mom, all my friends are driving. Is this even possible? And my parents always took the approach of, let's try and see how far we can go. And if someone tells us no, then that's the answer. And so we started exploring and doing research, and I saw some questions in the chat about what do we do about adaptive driving? And there are resources out there. You just have to dig for them. And I'm so grateful that MDA is providing some already. So we just went as far as we could. And I can drive. It takes a lot of adaptive tech. It took a lot of funding that we had to get resources for. But here you can see my husband and I are on a road trip. I don't remember where, but I love being in the driver's seat. I love being able to hop in my car in the middle of the day and take myself to a physical therapy appointment or go meet up with a friend for lunch, things like that. Driving was really pivotal for me. Another important step was starting treatment. I personally have spinal muscular atrophy, and most of my life there wasn't a treatment for my disability. It wasn't until I think about 2016 that the FDA approved their first treatment. And even then, friends, it took me, I think, a couple of years of knocking down barriers, advocating, researching before I myself could begin receiving that life-changing treatment. And it truly has changed the trajectory of my life. I know that everyone's experience on treatment or medication is different, so please remember this is my personal experience. But I'm no longer losing function. I'm maintaining my strength and even gaining some function and ability that I had lost. So it took a lot of hard work. Even just yesterday, I actually received another dose of this medication. And even after being on this treatment for years, yesterday I had to use those same tools of advocating and communicating and leaning on my support network to make it through a pretty challenging medical day. So I want you to just pause for a moment, okay? I want you to think about how far you have come. I want you to give yourself some grace and some forgiveness, and please don't beat yourself up if you're not where you want to be yet. Remember, this is a journey and you're on your way. Think about the experiences that you've already had that have cultivated within you that grit and that experience to face what's coming in the future to help you overcome those obstacles that are yet down the road. You have an incredible amount of experience to rely on. All right, tool number 2, focus on what you can control. Now, if your brain went, no duh, stick with me. Remember, there's a reason why I chose these 4 specific tools. Life with a disability is hard. I do not need to tell you that. There are many obstacles and challenges that we can't opt out of. Things that are outside of our control are things like inaccessibility, health challenges, government rules and systems, even other people's actions. We can't control that. Now, the reason why I want to point these out, again, this may be like, no duh, Amber, I know, I live this every day, is because we don't pause and recognize that distinguishing factor between what is outside of my control and what is inside my control. So we're going to start with what's outside of my control. MDA just talked about the advocacy steps that they are taking to change things at fundamental levels, laws and systems that help make things more accessibility, like the ADA. I'm so grateful for that. But I'm here to help you navigate your everyday life, and I can't wave a magic wand and turn the steps into a building, into a ramp. I can't do that. That is outside of my control. I can't change my SMA. I can't change the path of my disability, and neither can you. We can do things like exercise and take the recommendations from our health providers. But at the end of the day, I can't change exactly how the SMA is going to affect my body. Government rules and systems have been highlighted strongly. And I, again, am so grateful for the pioneers and advocates who are working on these things. I was hit incredibly hard by the marriage penalty when I got married last year. I lost all my benefits and all my funding. And I had to really use my skills to overcome those obstacles. And it's possible, but I'm hopeful for the day when that is no longer such an issue for us in the disabled community. So just recognize that there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. But when we focus on what is outside of our control, that can lead to a sense of helplessness and we just feel stuck. Any of you feel stuck when I look at this list of like what is outside of our control? Because it's daunting. But friends, I want you to hear me now. The key to successfully creating your own independence is knowing when to change the circumstances, the obstacles around you, and when to change your thoughts, your internal reaction to the obstacles around you. This is so important because there are things in our life that we cannot change. But if we focus on those things, we are funneling our energy in the wrong direction. I want to show you some examples from my personal life of how I've applied these tools. My kitchen. I wish I could take you in my home all and show you a little tour right now. Last year, I was renting an apartment with my husband, and the obstacle that I faced was there was no roll under cooking space. The kitchen was a galley kitchen and I couldn't access it super well. Again, it was like technically ADA compliant, but not very conducive to my needs. That was the obstacle. The things that were outside of my control was that I couldn't modify the space. I was renting. I can't go knocking down walls. I can't go installing a new stove unit. That was outside of the parameters of what I could get my landlord to agree on. Another thing is my poor upper body strength. Try as I might, exercise as much as I can, I can't make my arms stronger, and that's hard when it comes to cooking. And I didn't have a ton of money. I wish I could go hire a personal chef to just cook delicious and nutritious meals for me every day, but I don't have the money for that. This was the situation I was in. So let me show you how I changed the circumstance. I changed the actual obstacle around me. I went to my dad. I said, Dad, I really want to roll under cooking space and I have some ideas. Do you think we could make this work? On the screen here, you'll see on the left is an induction cooktop. Think like a a hot plate, but like the full power of a cooktop burner unit. I love induction cooktops. They're incredibly safe. If you have questions about that, message me later. But I said, I've got this, we could use this induction cooktop, but I need to be able to roll under it. Could you saw a hole out of the middle of this wooden workbench that's, I think, normally used for garage handyman projects, but I wanted to put it in my kitchen. Could you do that? And Dad said, well, let's give it a try and see how far we go. So he used his handyman skills to make this a portable roll under cook station is what we call it, where you can see from the pictures, friends, I can roll right underneath it. And I can do so much cooking and be so much more independent in my kitchen because of this cook unit that we built. I think in the picture I'm making chicken, looks like, but I can cook pastas, I can cook rice, I can grill sandwiches, I can scramble eggs, I can do so many more things in the kitchen now that I have this space where I can effectively work. So we made my own roll under cook space. And it did take some time and money, but a reasonable amount. I had to focus on what I can control. Friends, I had to think outside the box. My mom helped me do a lot of research. I didn't even know that induction cooktops were a thing until we started this process and found this amazing invention. We had to research some safe options because safety always comes first. I had to ask my dad for help. I don't have the handyman skills to saw out a hole, but he did. I had to find someone in my network who could help me do these things. Okay. Here's the magic. I changed the circumstance. I changed the obstacle. Remember, the key to successfully creating your own independence is knowing when to change the circumstance. I changed things physically in my kitchen, and when to change your thoughts. So next I'm going to share an example with you around when I changed my thoughts. Story time. This turtle will make sense, I promise. Because of my SMA, I can't get out of bed in the morning. I can't even sit up in bed. So I rely on a caregiver to come in and help me get out of bed in the morning. Now, if that caregiver doesn't come, I am absolutely stuck. And I feel like this little turtle stuck on his back. I already resonate with turtles. I mean, my mobility is pretty poor. I have to move really slowly. But stuck in bed, I really can't move anywhere. And I feel like a little turtle just stuck on his back. He can wave his arms as much as he wants, but he can't get anywhere. Now, before I learned this tool, if it was a morning when my caregiver didn't come, I would start to spiral. What happens is I text my caregiver and I say, hey, I'm ready to get up. Please come in. They come in, they help me get out of bed. But I'm sure many of you here today have had experiences where caregivers do not show up when you need them to. And I would start to feel anxious. And I think, well, are they coming at all? Have they forgotten about me? I really have to pee. Am I going to wet the bed? As I mentioned, I'm a business owner. I run a full-time coaching practice. What am I going to tell my clients if I can't come to their sessions today? And I would feel so anxious and so scared and so helpless. And then when my caregiver did arrive, I was like this. I was a snapping turtle. And I would snap at them and I'd say, "Where have you been? Why didn't you come? I needed you." And I didn't show up as the employer that I wanted to be. I didn't use good problem-solving skills. I would just snap at them. And nothing good would come of that. My day would be off to a horrible start. And that feeling of helplessness was just magnified in my life. So, I want to tell you about a Saturday morning when everything changed. I'd slept in, and I'd already kind of laid in bed a little extra than I was planning. At the time, I was living at home with my parents, and so my mom was my primary caregiver. So I sent her the text. I said, "Hey, Mom, I'm awake. Can you come help me up?" And she didn't come. I thought, oh, delicious. I get some extra time in bed this morning. And I just relaxed. I think I maybe scrolled on my phone for a little bit, but I was like, oh, this is just the best. And then 10 or 15 minutes passed and I still hadn't heard from Mom, so I called her. And she answered and I said, "Hey, Mom, did you see my text? I'm ready to get up." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was out in the garden. I didn't feel my phone vibrate. I'll come in right now." My mom loves to garden. And she came right in, and I wasn't a snapping turtle. I said, "Oh, thanks for coming in. Can you help me get up and get dressed?" And my day was off to a lovely start. Friends, the circumstance was the same. Amber was stuck in bed. Both mornings, exact same circumstance. The only thing that was different was my thoughts. Okay? The circumstance didn't need to change for me to feel better. I can't even change this circumstance. This is outside of my control. I cannot get out of bed without help. But the circumstance didn't need to change for me to feel better. So now, even if it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning, and my caregiver, for whatever reason, is late or doesn't come right when I text them, I can choose those same thoughts of, oh, lucky me. I love a little bit of extra time in bed. I can manage my mind and remind myself that they will come. And if something catastrophic has happened and my caregiver is not going to show up that day, I've got a backup list of friends and families who will come to my aid. And if it was an absolute emergency, I know I could call the fire department and they would come. I've never had to use that, but that's a helpful tool for my brain to be like, I will never be absolutely left in bed. I've created too much of a backup plan to let that happen. So friends, I want you to think about this. Apply this to your own life, okay? Focus on what you can control and know when to change the circumstance, when to change the actual obstacle, like my kitchen, and when to change your thoughts, like me stuck in bed. Because the quicker you can determine which approach to take, again, you are funneling your energy in the right direction. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of energy to be funneling in the wrong direction. I need to be maximizing what I'm spending my time on. All right, let's keep going. Tool number 3, break it down into small steps. We are faced all the time with obstacles that feel huge, tasks that feel daunting, applying for Medicaid, trying to get that adaptive vehicle, talking to your landlord about modifications to your apartment. Those things are huge, and I have the best news for you. If a thing feels too big, that's because it is. You probably thought you were lazy or you just didn't have enough motivation, and I'm here to tell you that's not true. I'm here to tell you that your brain was not designed to handle large tasks. It's simply not programmed that way. So you're not the problem. The size of the task is the problem. If a thing feels too big, that's because it is. So if a thing feels huge, your brain just freaks out and you're just thrown into overwhelm. I want to give you examples of how to manage this, how to break it down into small steps, okay? I recently had to apply for Medicaid when I moved to my new state with my husband, had to apply all over again. If I put apply for Medicaid on my to-do list, instantly my brain would feel overwhelmed. It's a monumental task. So if I use tool number 3 and I break it down into small steps, it would look something more like this. Now, again, I don't know what the entire process is going to look like, but I'm going to take my best guess. I know that first of all, I need to find an application. I don't even know where to do that, but Google's probably a pretty safe bet. I might hop on my computer and Google Minnesota Medicaid application, something like that, see where that takes me. I know I'll need to print the application. I don't currently own a printer, so I'd probably plan a trip to my local library and print it there. And then I'll fill out the fields that I do know. I may not know everything, but I'll just fill out what I know. At some point, I'm probably going to need to call my doctor, get some medical information, and gather some bank statements or taxes for that financial information. Notice on my to-do list, I also put talk through with mom because I know my brain and I know I'm going to get overwhelmed. And talking with my mom is one of the best ways that I manage that overwhelm. I'm a verbal processor, so I call her and say, hey, can you help me talk through this? What's the next step? Once the application is filled out, I'll make a copy because we never send in originals. No, no, no. And then I'll go to the post office and I'll mail that in. So much better. All I have to do is this first little step. All I have to do is open my computer and find that application. That is a manageable step. That's a chunk that my brain can chew on. So, the smaller the steps, the better. Some small steps might look like open my computer. That's a really small baby step. Small steps might look like find the phone number to call. We'll dial it tomorrow. For now, we're just going to find the phone number. Okay, truly keep the steps small. So again, I want you to think about the thing in your life that feels daunting. What is it? What is that obstacle that feels just too huge to even start? That's what I want you to start breaking down into smaller steps. What's the tiniest little baby step that you could start with? Who do you need to ask for help? What MDA resources have you seen today that might be helpful that you could go click on that link and start learning? Maybe that's your baby step. Okay. All right, final tool here. And then I have that free gift for you. Don't forget. Your support network and your social connections is again a tool that I fear we forget to utilize. Have you noticed in my time with you today how many times I've mentioned other people? My dad was the one to help me build that cook station. My mom is my verbal processor. My roommates helped me practice living on my own in college. The more you put in, the more you will get out. So please don't neglect your support network. Please be building those social connections around you because you never know which one might have the right tool in the moment when you need it. I am blessed with a very loving and supportive family, and they help me at every step along the way. Your support network might look a little different. It might look like a fantastic team of medical providers. It might look like the disability community. We are a strong network. We love to support each other. If you haven't tapped into that already, I'd encourage you to find people through Facebook groups, local meetups. Find other disabled people around you. It might look like friends. It might look like your church or religious gatherings. Your support network is all around you, but don't forget to utilize them as a tool. Okay, I'm running out of time here. So my free gift, a bonus tool for all of you today, is a free life coaching session with me. Your brain might tell you the lie that you need to do this all by yourself. Please don't believe that lie. Okay, I want to offer a free session with you. There's a QR code here on your screen. You can scan that with your camera, or I'm going to throw a link here in the chat in just a moment that will take you to a quick Google form. Give me your name and your email, and I will send you a message, and we'll coordinate a time to do a free one-on-one coaching session with me. I want you to bring that thing that feels hard. that task that feels insurmountable, bring that to a coaching session with me because I've got so many more tools that are going to help you move through this process. Independence looks different for everyone, but it is absolutely possible, and you just need the right tools to help you on that path forward. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can throw that in the chat. Throw that link here in the chat. And also my email is there. If you have any questions, please feel free to use me as a resource, amberbosselmancoaching@gmail.com. I'll also put that here in the chat. And I look forward to connecting with you all as you need a free session. I will say there's a lot of you here and my spots for free sessions are limited. So please don't wait. Fill out that form so I can reserve a free spot for you. All right, Sarah, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Amber. I'm sure everyone's glad that they hung on to the end for that surprise gift there. We are going to go into our second Q&A session, and if you could hang in there with me after Q&A, I have a little bit of information about some upcoming programs that you might be interested in. So Amber, we're going to jump right into the Q&A. Somebody says her two boys are 7 and 10, and they're starting the planning stages for if this will be feasible for us. What do we need to take into account with our boys to decide if they can live independently?
That's such a great question. And I want to just commend this mother for thinking ahead. At that age, you might think, oh, living independently is far off in the future. It's not. The sooner you start preparing for that, the better. So I don't know what the living situation is like or what the disability is for these kids, but I would tell you to start practicing what you can right now. I mentioned that I was hiring caregivers in college, but my mom had a caregiver come into the home when I was, oh golly, I think 14 or 15 years old, just so I could practice interacting with a caregiver, practice taking the lead and giving them assignments and asking for help from someone other than mom, because that was scary in the beginning. So look at what you're going to need for these children to live independently and start practicing those in little ways now.
Great points. We will also link in the chat. MDA has a print material resource. It is the Transition Guide for Young Adults. It has a great checklist to see where you're at. Do you know what your medications are? Do you know your doctors? But then it also has steps for parents and support people to start handing over those, that care for that medical transition. So we have different age groups in there, so we will make sure to link that for you to check out. Somebody wants to know more about, it says, independence to navigate high school and college campus.
Yeah, another great question. My advice in that one would be to find a disabled person who goes to that university. Again, this is why you've got to leverage your network, people. You got to find people with disabilities in other areas, because each campus should have a disability office. I would start there because they're going to tell you what services they provide, the accessibility of the campus, but there's nothing like the lived experience. That's why I like to find someone with a disability on that campus to talk to. So those two things, find a real life person and also connect with the disability office for that campus. Every campus should have that office.
Great, thank you. Do you have any strategies or perspective on supporting mental wellness?
Oh my gosh, that is my jam. That is what I eat and breathe every day. So yes, that would be one that I cannot explain here in this Q&A. I would say please email me personally and we can talk more about what those resources are for mental health, because we talk so much about the physical toll that our disability takes on us, but I don't think we address enough the mental toll that just living with a disability or caring for someone with a disability can take. So there are resources out there, but please reach out to me so I can share more of those resources in greater depth.
Thank you. And then I did see quickly somebody asked if you hold group discussions or if on what platform with your coaching, and are they group or are they individual?
I do both. Yeah, group and one-on-one, just depending on the needs. So both. And over Zoom, I should say. Yes, they're all virtual.
Okay, great. Someone is interested in learning how to live more independently, particularly regarding how to hire and afford in-home care attendants. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yes, this is such a challenge for, I think, everyone in the disabled community. All the years up until I got married, I was able to get funding through my state waiver program to pay for caregivers. So everything is very state specific. That's why the MDA resource guide is so great, because they have people who can talk with you about your state specific requirements. So that's my number one recommendation, is try and get involved in a waiver program that will provide funding for caregivers. As I mentioned, I was hit really hard by the marriage penalty and I lost all those benefits when I got married. So this is out of the box and not everyone will agree with this, but I did a fundraiser and I fundraised enough money to pay for about a year and a half of caregiving until I could research more options and find more funding in the new state. As I mentioned, I just moved to Minnesota. So now I'm working on getting benefits there in Minnesota. So please do your research, because there are support networks out there, but it's hard to know what you do and do not qualify for. And if you don't qualify for something, then you're going to have to think outside the box and maybe use your friend network, your family network. It's a problem that I wish I had a better solution for, but unfortunately, it is so different depending on which state you live in.
It is. It definitely is. Now, kind of along the same route, sources for caregiver assistance. So if you're looking for an aid, where have you found aids? Or do you know anyone else who has found them, maybe in an out-of-the-box way?
Yes. Yeah, great question. There are many, many ways, and this is actually something that I coach lots of my clients through, is the process of finding good caregivers. So some places you could think of are Facebook. Facebook is good because you can join groups that are specific to your geographic area and post your job ad there. You can post on Indeed. You can post on care.com. I'm religious, and I have very good luck with asking for help from my religious circles. So it's still a paid position, but I find that people in my church networks are often willing to come in for a few hours here and there for some small shifts to do caregiving. So don't be afraid to tap those networks. There are also some, if you live near a university, that is a gold mine. You can contact the university and ask to put the job posting out to nursing students or nursing departments, courses of study where that would be good hands-on experience for them. And college students are also willing to work unique hours, kind of outside the normal 8 to 5 shifts. So those are just a couple that come off the top of my head of some places you can try and find caregivers.
Great points, and I think bringing up that college resource is a great idea. Let's see here. So someone says their daughter has significant fatigue and they don't want her to do things that they can do, since they don't want her to waste energy. So how do you balance that out? So not doing too much for your children, but also making sure she's not fatigued.
Oh, yeah. I hear so much mama heart in that question, so much love of that mother wanting to protect her daughter. But what I would say is, remember that your daughter gets to decide what she wants to do. So I think a great way to approach that is just asking, would you like to try this on your own? Would you like me to help? Because it doesn't do any favors for the daughter's independence if someone is always stepping in and helping. Even if it's coming from a place of good intentions, then the daughter doesn't get the chance to practice those skills of asking for help when she needs it and self-determining when she wants assistance or not. So I know that that's coming from so much love from the mama, but maybe ask if she wants the help or not, and resist that impulse to just step in. I know it's hard.
Absolutely. Thank you. Someone wants to know how to sustain living independently during graduate school. I'm sure that's a busy, busy time for people.
Yeah. I would say take it at your own pace, because if your graduate school is very demanding. And so I'd say make sure that you're taking care of your physical needs. Don't burn yourself out. Remember, it took me 7 years to do a 4-year degree. But that was the pace I needed to go at to stay healthy and stay in it for the long term. And just go at your own pace. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think we'll just do maybe two more. What are some suggestions for caregivers to multiple disabled family members to care for themselves with limited support when respite is not available?
Can you read that question one more time for me, Sarah?
So someone is a caregiver for multiple disabled family members, and they want to know strategies for caring for themselves as a caregiver with very limited support. So it sounds like they're needed a lot by their family members, but they also want to, try to prioritize themselves. And it looks like respite is not available for their family members that they're caring for.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what a challenging situation to be in. Um, I think that's a tough question to answer, but I would recommend that they do spend some time trying to find other supports. If respite's not an option, then it's time to think outside the box and maybe again leverage your social network, your other connections, um, because burnout is so real, and I think it's only a matter of time before most caregivers experience a little bit of burnout. Another recommendation might be to kind of set up some boundaries, some non-negotiables around times when this caregiver just has some time to themselves. Again, that's possible if other supports are in place. That has to be part of the equation. But maybe if it's just an hour or two once a day or once a week, when they know that this caregiver is unavailable, they're going to be taking some me time and communicating that clearly to all the family members so that boundary can be honored.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then the last one we're going to go over, we got a couple of questions on this topic, is just transitioning from childhood to adulthood as it relates to independent living. I saw some questions from parents. We kind of already addressed that a little bit. But any tips you have for transitioning from childhood to adulthood?
Yeah, I would reiterate to start early. Don't wait until you're 18 years old to start thinking about what that's going to look like, to start practicing those skills of independent living. Start early. Um, I'd encourage you to dream big. And I know that feels scary when you're not even sure how you're going to live independently, but when you have a tangible goal that you're reaching towards, it becomes a lot easier to fill in those steps of how you're going to get there. So know, like, do you want to go to college? Great. Let's figure out how to get you there. Do you want to go straight into the workforce? Great. Let's figure out how to get you there. I know many people with disabilities who are very comfortable still living at home with their parents, but they want to carve out independence in other ways. Great. Let's figure out how to get you there. Also, talk with other parents, I think would be very helpful to see how they are navigating that transition. Um, it's it's so much easier to move forward if you know that it's possible and that it's okay.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to wrap up our Q&A now. So thank you so much, Amber and Shannon. If you're still on, thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your time and expertise and everything you do for the neuromuscular community. And Amber, I think I speak for all of us when I say you have beautiful wedding photos.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, if everyone could just hang on with me for just a minute, I want to tell you a little bit more about our MDA community. Again, if you're new to MDA or if you've been diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease under MDA's umbrella, Or if you are a loved one of someone who has been diagnosed, we encourage you to stay engaged with us. You can do this by visiting mda.org/join and completing a short form. Joining is free and we'll keep you up to date on the latest research, educational programs like this one, and other supports. We invite you to join us for upcoming MDA community education programming. MDA is hosting in-person education symposiums in November in Stanford, California, Irvine, California, and Dallas, Texas. These are half-day multi-session programs with both disease-specific learning and general learning sessions that are applicable to all neuromuscular diseases. Engaged symposiums are free to attend, but registration is required. If you have any questions, you can email us directly at mdaengage@mdausa.org. Additionally, registration is currently open for our MDA mentor programs. We're very excited about this program. We offer STEM and general career mentoring. These 5-week programs are held virtually and are open to youth and young adults with neuromuscular disease age 14 to 21. An application is required, but there's no cost to participate. This program connects youth with mentors who are established in a variety of fields while providing hands-on learning and a supportive environment to discover their strengths and interests. You can learn more by visiting the community education webpage or by clicking on the links in the chat. In addition to our speakers, MDA would like to thank our sponsor, Edgewise Therapeutics, for partnering with us to bring you today's webinar. And we would like to hear your comments about today's webinar. Once you leave the webinar, a web page will automatically pop up with a short survey. Completing the survey will provide us with important insights to help develop future programming. If anyone has questions about this webinar, please feel free to contact MDA's Resource Center. I know you've heard us say that a lot, but they're very helpful, at 1-833-ASK-MDA1. Or you can email resourcecenter@mdausa.org, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Again, thank you so much to Shannon and Amber for your time and for sharing your expertise. This does conclude today's webinar, so we hope to see you all again. Thank you for coming.